Hello, I'm Bailey Leisure, and this is my Week 4 NFL season recap as I'm back after missing Week 3, as I will be recapping the action that happened in Week 4 of the 2018 NFL. It started off Thursday night matchup that happened, the Vikings versus the Rams. This was a quarterback shootout, and both Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff, they put up huge numbers uh, in this game. I think the Vikings were able to do this really because of the absence of the key to lead, and there was more focus on Marcus Peters. So it kind of not having those, that tandem of cornerbacks opened things up for the Vikings. And Kirk Cousins was able to put up big numbers, but despite that, Jared Goff was just a little bit better, throwing for over 460 yards and throwing 5 touchdowns. And the Rams were able to win a shootout, 38-31. The Vikings really, their defense has not been off to a great start this season, and if they want to go anywhere this year, they're going to have to pick it up on defense and return to that. Moving on to the Dolphins and the Patriots, this game was expected, usually how it goes in when the Dolphins come to New England. Miami came into this game 3-0, and people were worrying about the Patriots because of their defense, but the Patriots basically put their stamp on this game and said, we're still the team to beat in the AFC East. Tom Brady didn't have great numbers, but he did throw 3 touchdowns. Ryan Tannehill was not impressive at all. He threw 100 yards. I think he got benched in this game for Brock Osweiler. But just the Patriots were able to dominate this game. Josh Gordon made his debut for the Patriots, and he caught 2 passes for 32 yards. And the Patriots were able to blow out the Dolphins 38-7. Jaguars and the Jets. The Jaguars trying to both teams coming off disappointing weeks. Jaguars trying to pick it up a little bit more on offense. Leonard Fournette, I think, got hurt in this game, and he's been ruled out for Week 5. But Blake Bortles was able to bounce back, threw for almost 400 yards and threw a couple touchdowns. T.J. Yeldon did all right in relieving Leonard Fournette. Westbrook for the Jaguars caught 9 passes for 130 yards. Dante Moncrief also had 100 yards catching, and the Jags were able to handily defeat the Jets 31-12. Texans versus Colts. This was a game. I think the Texans had a big 2-touchdown lead into the fourth quarter, but the Colts were able to come back. This game went into overtime where the Colts had the ball. They were on the 40-yard line of their own, and they decided to go for it. Now, people think it's questionable. They didn't get the fourth down. The Texans were able to go down the field and or in that short distance and were able to get the game-winning field goal. But I don't think I can't fault the Colts for doing this because you don't play to tie. You play to win. So I don't think it's as questionable as it is, but the Houston Texans were finally able to get their first victory of the year. The Buccaneers versus the Bears, and the Bears pretty much dominated this game. Mitchell Trubisky was just throwing bombs, threw for 354 yards, 6 touchdowns. Ryan Fitzpatrick got benched at halftime for Jameis Winston, who was eligible after serving that 3-game suspension, but even that couldn't happen. They couldn't do anything. They were blown out 48-10, and as a result of that, for the next game that the Buccaneers will play, Jameis Winston has been named the starter. The Bengals versus the Falcons. This was for the second week in a row. Was a big shootout for the Falcons, and unfortunately, once again, they were on the losing end of it as A.J. Green was able to catch a touchdown within the last 10 seconds. And the Bengals off to a pretty decent start at 3-1. Andy Dalton threw for over 330 yards and threw for 3 touchdowns. A.J. Green had a decent game, catching that big touchdown. And I think the problem with the Falcons and what's preventing them from being a playoff contender is they are suffering. Their defense has really been hurt with injuries this year. And not only that, once again, their inability, despite Julio Jones having 170 yards and leading in receiving yards as of Week 4, they just cannot get him into the end zone. And I feel like they got to get him in at least a couple times, and they got to work on that better. But just the Falcons off to a disappointing start, and I'm not sure if they're able to overcome the defensive injuries. Eagles versus the Titans. This was a pretty competitive game that went into overtime. Carson Wentz played pretty well, threw for a couple of touchdowns and over 350 yards. Marcus Mariota was able to play on par to that, throwing similar numbers and throwing a couple touchdowns as well. This game went into overtime, where it was into the last minute of overtime, and the Tennessee Titans were able to win thanks to a touchdown by Marcus Mariota to Davis. And the Tennessee Titans probably got the upset of the week, defeating the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles 26-23. Bills versus Packers. The Bills coming off a surprising blowout of the Vikings in the previous week. This time it was not the case. The Packers, I mean, Aaron Rodgers didn't have to do much. The defense basically held. That offense struggled for the Buffalo Bills. Aaron Rodgers just did enough. He threw for 300 yards, threw a touchdown. I think they got a couple field goals in this game. The Packers didn't have to do that much, and they were able to shut out the Buffalo Bills 22-0. Cowboys-Lions. This game was pretty competitive. Dallas had one of the worst offenses by numbers, I think second to last in the NFL coming into this game. They picked it up, and the guy that picked it up for them was Ezekiel Elliott. 152 yards rushing. He had 88 yards receiving. So that's over 200 yards of all-purpose yards, and he was the big player in this game. Detroit played just as Matthew Stafford did very well in this game, and they got the lead 2 minutes prior, but the Cowboys were able to get a game-winning field goal by their new kicker. I believe Marr was able to get the game-winning field goal, the 38-yard field goal, and the Dallas Cowboys were able to get to 500 at 2-2. Browns versus the Raiders. The Browns finally coming off a win, and the Raiders were 0-3 going into this game. Baker Mayfield did pretty good, throwing 300 yards for 2 touchdowns. He did have that offense turned the ball over a lot too many times. There were a couple controversial calls in this game that I think kind of ruined the outcome of this game. One of the plays, I think Derek Carr had clearly fumbled the ball, but they called the referees called his forward progress way too early. This happened to the Raiders as well, where Marshawn Lynch his forward progress was called down a little bit too early as well, and which could have resulted in a touchdown for Marshawn Lynch. And then, controversially, inside 2 minutes, the Browns had the 8-point lead, and it looked like on third down, as they were trying to run out the clock, clearly got a first down, pretty conclusive evidence that he got the first down, but they reviewed it and they reversed it. The Raiders were able to get an 8-point lead, they were able to get a touchdown or 2-point conversion to tie the game. The game went into overtime, and the Raiders were able to get the game-winning field goal and win their first game of the season. I feel like there were too many controversial calls that made this game, I feel like kind of ruined the outcome of the game. But the Raiders, at the end of it, were able to get the victory, and John Gruden was able to get his first win of the year. Seahawks versus the Cardinals. So neither, this was an interesting game. Kind of low scoring. Russell Wilson didn't really play that well. I think they got a turnover. The kickers were missing field goals. Sebastian Janikowski and Phil Dawson. I mean, they missed a couple field goals in the first half, and then the Cardinals lost this game going to 0-4. Josh Rosen had his first start, and I don't think Josh Rosen, even though the numbers, you look at it, he threw only 180 yards and threw only a touchdown. That's not counting for the drops that the wide receivers had. I think they had 4 or 5 drops where he threw 40 to 50-yard passes he probably, had they caught half of those catches, would have had 300 yards, a couple touchdowns, and the Cardinals probably would have walked away with the victory. And then once again, for the second week in a row, how they managed the clock late in the game cost them. So they had the ball. I think they had a first down. It was inside 3 minutes. The Seahawks only had 1 timeout. And, they had 3 plays, and they decided to run on all those plays. And I didn't like that call because I think they should have at least thrown once or twice. I mean, Josh Rosen was just going down the field. He looked accurate. He looked confident. And they decided to run 3 straight times, giving this, I think the Seahawks got the ball back inside 2 minutes after Phil Dawson missed a 45-yard field goal. He had missed 2 field goals, a 50-yarder at the end of the first half as well. And Sebastian Janikowski was able to redeem himself, and he was able to get the game-winning 52-yard field goal. Probably the big story coming out of this game was Earl Thomas getting hurt, fracturing his leg. And as he was leaving the side, getting carted off, he flipped off his the Seahawks sideline, and that was definitely a big talking point coming out of this week. And but nonetheless, this was a game I think once again poorly coached by the Arizona Cardinals. Even though I thought Josh Rosen looked pretty decent, unfortunately his team couldn't back him up, and the Seahawks were able to come away with the victory, 20-7. Saints versus the Giants. So this was this was the game really just dominated by Alvin Kamara for the Saints, and that was the key. He ran for 134 yards. He had 3 touchdowns. Eli Manning did not play really well in this game, and I'm starting to see Eli. I feel like he's really showing off his age, and I think the end is coming near for him, if you ask me. The offensive line couldn't protect him, as well as Saquon Barkley didn't have a great game. He had a touchdown, but he only ran for 44 yards, and he only had 10 attempts. The Saints were able to easily come away with the victory in this game, 33-8. 49ers versus the Chargers. This was the first game that the 49ers were playing without Jimmy Garoppolo. And, C.J. Beathard, I think is his name. He played decent, throwing for almost 300 yards and a couple touchdowns. The Chargers probably would have won this game more definitively. They won 29-27. Phillip Rivers threw for a couple touchdowns, and Melvin Gordon was able to rush for 100 yards. But I believe that they missed a couple kicks, couple extra points. Caleb Sturgis, he missed 2 extra points. He was 3 out of 4 for a field goal. If he didn't miss those extra points and he was able to convert one of these field goals, they probably would have won by a little bit more. And I think that was the difference in this game. But the Chargers were able to overcome those special team struggles and win this. The Ravens versus the Steelers, the Sunday Night Football matchup. The Ravens went out to a quick lead, a 14-0 lead, had a chance to potentially go up, I think, by 3 or 4 touchdowns if Joe Flacco didn't miss that early throw to Michael Crabtree, who was wide open, and Alex Collins didn't fumble the ball on the 1-yard line. The Steelers were able to come back in that game, but in the second half, the Ravens were able to contain Ben Roethlisberger and contain Antonio Brown. The running game didn't run that much. James Conner did not have a great game, only running 9 times for 19 yards. And it's being reported that Le'Veon Bell is going to report by week 7, which is the Steelers' bye week. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be on the team. There is reports that they're still looking at possibly trading him, but he is going to report. But he will, if he does report for the team, he'll report by the bye week, and I think the Steelers could definitely use him. But even with that, I think the biggest flaw for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now is defense. And I just feel like ever since they lost Ryan Shazier, who was kind of the heart and soul of that defense, it's what's preventing them from being a potential Super Bowl contender. But the Ravens in the second half, they just did a good job managing the clock. And Justin Tucker, probably the best kicker in the NFL, was able to hit some big field goals, and that was the difference in this football game. And then the Monday Night Football game matchup, the Chiefs versus the Broncos. This was a pretty good game. Once again, Patrick Mahomes didn't play very impressive, but he made a lot of big plays. He threw for 300 yards. Like I said, as I'm correcting myself, this was probably his weakest game so far. But it was probably one of his biggest wins as well. He made a couple big plays, including that left-handed throw he made in the fourth quarter. He was able to get the Chiefs the victory. Kareem Hunt had a big game, throwing for 120 yards. The Broncos, defensively, they did decent with what Mahomes has done so far this year, containing him. But I think the key in this game was that missed throw. They were marching down the field within 30 seconds. That missed throw that Case Keenum had was throwing to Demaryius Thomas. I mean, Demaryius Thomas was wide open, and he overthrew him, and he beat the Kansas City Chiefs cornerback. If he made that perfect throw, the Broncos would have scored that touchdown, and they would have won the game. But even beyond that, though, Patrick Mahomes once again had a great week, and the Chiefs were able to stay undefeated. Moving on, my players of the week. Offensive player of the week is definitely going to go to Mitchell Trubisky. Could have went to Ezekiel Elliott, but I choose Trubisky. Had almost 350 yards passing, and he threw 6 touchdowns. I mean, even though against the Buccaneers, this is the first time a Bears quarterback did this in almost 70 years. So that's very impressive that he was able to do that. And then defensive player of the week, I'm going to go with Jadeveon Clowney, as he was able to give the Texans the lead, or their first win of the year. He had couple sacks, 4 total tackles, and the Texans were able to get the win over the Indianapolis Colts, and he was a big reason why they were able to win this week. And that's it for my NFL Week 4 recap video. So as always, follow me on Twitter at BaileyLager96. If you liked the video, click like, subscribe if you like the content on my channel, and leave your comments below on what you thought about what happened in Week 4 of the the 2018 NFL season. If you like baseball, if you like Major League Baseball, I recently did yesterday I did a MLB season, regular season recap, as well as my wild card predictions. Stay tuned tomorrow. You're possibly going to get 2 videos on this channel, as I will be doing my divisional round predictions, as well as my Week 5 NFL picks video. So thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you all later.